there about the yellow, how they're great in salads. Just so everyone realises, mushrooms actually have a coating, if you like, that is called chitin, and that's all mushrooms, and they actually, humans can't break them down. So if you're eating mushrooms raw, they're fine, but you don't get any nutritional value out of them. So you can imagine it, if you're in a unit, you probably don't want sugarcane mulch or straw all over the place. It can be a little bit messy, but yeah, get started and be open to change, I suppose.
That's awesome advice for sure.
Women on a green mission. Follow along as two friends document their unfurling permaculture journeys.
Join our chats each week where we will be sharing how we and others apply the ethics and principles of permaculture to our gardens and daily life.
We're no experts. We're at the start of our journey, learning and fumbling our way to a greener life. You're guaranteed to witness a few successes, plenty of failures, laughs and swearing. We'd love your company along the way.
You're listening to the Practical Permaculture podcast with Jo Flintham and Elise Gallagher. Hey.
Hey, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I am good. What's been happening this week?
We're slowly moving south this week to make it to Newcastle. If you listen to last week's episode, I'm heading to Jo's place.
Yay!
I'm going to go park up and be roomies with Jo for a week. So we're recording this just before Christmas, so we'll be heading to Newcastle and then flying down to Adelaide for Christmas to see some family, which is nice.
I can't wait. It'll be so good to see you on Sunday. Really looking forward to it.
And we get to plan to do some recordings together rather than over the interweb, so that we can be together and have that energy and, ping pong back and forth with our banter a bit more, which will be nice.
Yeah, I think it'll be good. I think it'd be far more casual because we'll just be able to kick back and just natter on. Like it is so different when we're recording via video, but how lucky are we to have that technology to be able to do that? Like really.
Oh, totally.
Really lucky. Yeah. Oh, but yeah, it'll be good.
What about you?
Oh, well, this week, I've accepted a job. So if you've listened to previous episodes, we decided to wind up our business. It's been several years and we're sick of traveling. So we decided to go back into the job market, which I know is probably the opposite of what a lot of people would want to do or want to hear. But for us, it means that there's stability. It means that we've got a regular income coming in. That means we can get more projects finished and have some routine. I've missed routine. Never ever thought
projects around the farm, you mean?
Projects around the farm, yeah, that's right. Because before, with being all over the place, and it was sort of, it wasn't so much feast and famine in the business, but there was a lot of moving parts to it, and a lot of travel and a lot of stress. And when you're stressed, sometimes you just don't have the mental capacity for other things. So even when I wasn't busy doing work, it was like I was sort of kind of stuck in this spiral, which I couldn't then really devote a lot of time and energy to projects. So now I've got one more project to finish a business project to finish for a client, and then I'm done, and then kick off work just before Christmas. So really excited for that. Looks like it's
big
a great company, and it's going to be a good fit for us, for myself and for them. So that's
big changes. Yeah,
big changes. And we have also been planting out more trees. So these trees, I think some people can relate, have been sitting in pots for way too long. These were those purchases that I just couldn't go past. They were either we bought macadamias and loquats off some local ladies from we're just on Facebook Marketplace, and of course they popped up, and I went, I need those in my life right now. And we had no plans for them. So they've been sitting in their pots eking by, and I felt so sorry for them. Plus we had, we bought a heap of white mulberries. We've got a heap of chatoot mulberries, both red and white in already. But we went to a nursery for something totally different, and there was it's lethal, a little on sale section, that little sort of group of plants these have been marked down. White mulberries, and I grabbed myself 4 of those because you can never have enough mulberries. So we put a few of those in yesterday. But I tell you what, geez, it's hard going here. We got really heavy clay soil. Yeah.
We got clay soil too.
Oh,
Yeah. Oscar's going to be in a rude shock when we get on the land, because I've literally just been on Marketplace on my phone, like saving all these things that I'm like, oh, that's a good resource. That's a good resource. I'm going to get that. So when we like settle and we get up there, he'll get home from being away from work one day and there'll just be all this stuff on the block, because I'm like you. I'm like, I can't go past that deal. I want that. We want an outdoor bathtub, don't we? What about some old wheelbarrows for like decoration? And what plants can I get? And so, he's gonna have just stuff on the front lawn, I think, for a while.
There's so much temptation. There's so much, but also freebies. And I know that I've plugged this before, but freebies, because most free stuff that you'll see, on Marketplace or anywhere else would otherwise go to landfill. If people can't get rid of it, they just get the craps and they just ditch it. So we've picked up 2 trampolines this week. Not because I'm getting into exercising on a trampoline. No.
I just see you on the podcast on the trampoline, Joe.
We picked up an 8-foot one, so that's going to go into we'll probably go in with the chickens for a little while until we can get the Madagascar bean growing up and over their dome. We've got an old trampoline that we converted into a dome.
Just for shade?
Just for shade, yeah.
Cool,
yeah, so
that's a good idea.
In there, that'll give them a little bit of extra shade. And then we've got a 14-foot one that we've put out in the paddock for the sheep. The horses seem to be more interested in it than the sheep at the moment. I'm just convinced them that they can't actually get under there. They're a bit too big for that.
That's
but
so cute.
I'm hoping that it'll just give them a little, like, we've put it in a shady area anyway, but it just is going to give them some denser shade and a little bit of weather protection as well, because we do have the stable, but 2 horses, 3 sheep often don't go into the stable together.
All together.
So I thought, instead of having to have this huge project where we've got to build all these shelters and, often buy material, even though we upcycle a lot of it here, there's often still things you've got to buy. We went, well, let's just use trampolines. They're the perfect height. They're totally usable. And then what we're going to do from there is keep collecting them, because a lot of people are getting rid of them at the moment. And we're going to use those to make exclusion tunnels. So again, instead of having to buy polypipe or anything like that, you just use half a trampoline over the top, and you can use your connectors and the netting poles for. If anyone that's listening to the podcast, I'm describing it with my arms, so I'm sure you can totally picture that. But you just use the netting poles.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. So that's going to save on cost. And then the only thing that I have to buy, because again, I'm collecting free or very cheap old screen doors. The only thing that we would have to buy is the either the veg net or the shade cloth, depending on what we're going to use. We're thinking we might even use shade cloth.
Yeah.
And then in winter, we can even then put plastic over it, so like heavy-duty clear plastic that we can then reuse and have that as a hothouse, so we can potentially extend our growing season. So we'll see whether we actually need to get to that stage, but it gives us options and we don't have to pay a lot of money. The only effort is basically, throwing the trailer on the ute and going and picking up.
Well, after talking to Kellie today, we talked to Kellie from the Pickled Patch. She gave me some great ideas, because we'll be starting from scratch. I was really interested in how she was digging the holes in preparation. It might be a whole year or season ahead to prep the soil for all her trees. Like I was kind of racking my brain thinking, we're going to have all these big composts and create all this dirt, or get some soil, brought in and then let it sit there so the pH kind of levels itself out, and how are we going to build these beds and, get the soil up to scratch. But that was such a clever idea that she had, to just dig out where you're going to be planting and just chuck some scraps in there, and, leaf litter and mulch and veggie scraps and everything to just condition the soil.
And let that break down.
Comfrey, what else did she say? Yeah.
Anything organic. We
clever.
With the trees that we've just planted, and we do with every tree that we plant. That's why we have to dig a hole and not just plant above ground. But we put our animals, like mainly like chickens or poultry, that have passed away, or any like rabbits that have been found dead on the property. They might have died from mixo or something like that. Or any even rodents that we find. They all go into the deep freezer, our morgue, and when we're ready to plant a tree, they come out and they go under the tree. We bury them deep enough that they're not going to get dug back up. Plus, they've also got a cage around them as well, so that prevents some access. But I mean, I suppose if something really wants to dig it up, it probably will. But we haven't had anything dug up yet, and we don't really bury them that deep.
And you said you're on clay soil there, which that's what we're going on to, really heavy and a quite compacted clay. So we're going to have to break it up. And I went to the lady at the native nursery, and she was like, so many people have failures with all of their natives here, like mound it and all that kind of thing. But how do you find working with clay soil and being where you are?
It's shit.
Thanks, Joe. That gives me heaps of confidence.
Get a good workout.
Shit, or your plants would die. The hard work of digging it up isn't my kind of issue. I just don't want everything to die because it's getting waterlogged, or that it, you know what I mean? That's my issue that I'm worried about.
Building it up is absolutely the way to go. Just make sure that the mound is quite flat at the top, so I'm not creating this sharp angle where the water's just going to run away. I'll create a nice flat top and then a very gentle slope down the side. Do a little bit of digging out just around the base of the tree to encourage water to go down there to start with, and then mulch the crap out of it. Like Charlie Carp as well, like the pellets. We've always got a bag of those. I mean, Charlie Carp's fantastic. It utilises.
What's that?
Oh, Charlie Carp. So
never heard of it.
A company that take carp out of the waterways, because carp are a pest in Australia. So they take carp out of the waterways and they turn that into a fish emulsion liquid and pellets. It's a win-win. They're taking a pest out of the environment and they're providing a product to gardeners, which is fantastic. The plants absolutely love it. So I'm a big fan. Like, I try and keep everything as much possible in that closed loop system that we've got here by using compost and weed teas and things like that. But every now and then it is good if you find something that really does work. It's a natural product, and it's taking that pest out of the environment. So it's like, I can't see the issue there. Love it.
Well, that's good to know. Well, let's get into today's episode then, hey?
Fantastic. I think so. I think we've kept everyone waiting long enough with us nattering on. But I know that everyone's going to love this episode, because who doesn't love mushrooms?
Yeah, so Kellie, she's got the Pickled Patch. She's got a mushroom thing going on, and she shares a bit about her land and how she got into permaculture. So it's really good listening to her and catching up with what she's doing there.
Wonderful. And we'll make sure that we put all the links that we talk about in the episode in the show notes. And also check us out on the Facebook. What have we got? We've got a Facebook group, haven't we?
A Facebook group. Yeah.
Yay. There's a group of
Facebook group. So I know if you jump on there, most of the people who interview end up on there too, which is cool. So they can maybe add to the conversation once the podcast goes live. We can ask some questions, but we can also, Joe and I can keep that conversation going afterwards if you've got more things you wanted to know about or something you wanted to clarify or just to add to the conversation. You can jump in there and do that. Have a little community.
If there's a particular topic that you want us to cover, or maybe a particular person that you may want to have us interview, then you can certainly pop that in the group as well.
Enjoy.
Well, hi, welcome back to the Practical Permaculture podcast. We've got Kellie Wall today from the Pickled Patch. Hi, Kellie, welcome.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Good, yeah, really good today.
Wonderful. And of course, we have Elise. So when we kick off, we also like to acknowledge the Aboriginal lands of which we're recording on. So I'm recording from the lands of the Wonnarua people here in Leakenfield, New South Wales. Kellie, where are you?
So I'm in Medowie on the land of the Worimi.
I grew up in Nelson Bay, so I'm familiar with that kind of area. Yeah, but at the moment, no, not at all. At the moment, I'm up at Broom's Head recording on Yagle country.
Fantastic. So the Pickled Patch. So let's, I suppose, let our listeners and our viewers know a little bit about the Pickled Patch. So you're based at Medowie, and the Pickled Patch is, I'm going to let you explain it because it's going to be far more coherent if you explain what the Pickled Patch is.
Okay, so it's just like it's our home. And it's a permaculture designed garden around that. And then as a side, I've started doing some mushroom growing workshops, and we're using this space here as a sort of a demo property to grow mushrooms on and teach people how to grow mushrooms easily at home. Easy to grow lots of mushrooms at home.
So nice and low cost and accessible for everyone.
Absolutely, yeah. Most of the stuff that we use, you've probably got at home already.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah,
that's wonderful. So we definitely want to dive into that, but before we do, so that's a little bit about the Pickled Patch. So tell us about yourself and your family.
Okay, so my real job, apart from this, is this is a full-time job as well. But my other job is as a paramedic.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Cool.
so yeah, I've been a paramedic now for about 21 years. So I suppose my permaculture garden and all that got started sort of as a catalyst of that, and being on road for so long, and I needed an outlet, if that makes sense. So I needed a something to get away from the on-road stuff, and unfortunately the trauma that sometimes comes along with that job. And my mum and dad always had gardens growing up and grew a lot of their own sort of food. So I sort of had an interest from there. And then we come to this place in Madawi about 12 years ago. And I started a few gardens and all that sort of thing, but sort of really wasn't making any traction. It'd be feast or famine. I'd have, heaps of tomatoes one day, and then nothing for months. And so I was sort of starting to do a few courses and, workshops with a few different people and that around here, learning more about it. And also Aaron Boyer from Urban Culture, who is like a mushroom growing, and he actually had a little business. He was in the back of a truck and going around Australia teaching people how to grow mushrooms.
Oh, cool.
So I was like, oh, that looks interesting, something different. And so I did one of his beginner courses initially, and then I had a job go quite badly at work and decided that I actually thought I was not going to go back. I took a year off and, got my head together, if you like. And in that time, I actually did, it was like 2019, so just before the pandemic. And I actually went and did my PDC with Brett Cooper up at Limestone. And that sort of changed our lives.
Wow.
Even as a family, it changed our lives quite significantly. All of a sudden I had the knowledge and all that to, start my gardens much more than I had before, and in an easier way. We all sort of, in this podcast, we know what permaculture does and all that sort of thing, and how it can be much easier to do than normal, monocropping and all that sort of thing. So it took me a little while to convince my husband. He didn't really understand what I was trying to do in the beginning, and he loves his lawn. So, and I have 3 boys as well, so they liked their motorbike track and all that sort of thing. So it has taken a little while to, scramble some space from their pursuits, the lawn and and so forth. But I actually took my husband up to Brett's on a farm tour one day, and he come back and he was like, "Oh, I get it now.
I see what you're doing here."
Yeah. So I get it now." And I suppose on the other side, I was really interested. So one of my sons, who's 16, Braith, has severe cerebral palsy. And so he's like non-verbal and in a chair, but he's also peg fed. So through a tube in his tummy. And as a result of that, he was fed this formula that, lots of peg fed adults and children are on. And I just looked at it, and he was not gaining weight and he was vomiting all the time. And I'm like, this is not working. And we ended up and I wanted to have beautiful fresh food that I could use to feed him, as opposed to this grotty formula that had corn syrup and all this horrible stuff in it. So, and unfortunately, it's really expensive to buy organic veggies, and not only that, often it's not available, or not in the quantities that sort of we needed. So that was another catalyst to grow our own food and all that sort of thing. And I'm happy to report he's now been on blended diet or real food for several years and has put on weight and looks so much better. So just by using real food, so that, I suppose, is what really led us to permaculture and growing our own food and so forth.
You find even the organic veggies on the store, I don't think people tend to buy them as much. They tend to sit there and they're not fresh.
Absolutely.
Which is kind of a bit counterintuitive, really, when you're trying to buy organic vegetables and then they sit there because no one's buying them because they're expensive. And
often they don't look great either. They're just
don't.
Not, So
the quality isn't there.
I actually often do a veggie rescue from one of the supermarkets around here, and the organic produce is the stuff that comes through a lot, because it, one, it's all wrapped in plastic as well and put a use-by date on it.
I've never understood that.
I know.
So silly.
So often that's the stuff that will come through, so you're right. People don't buy it because it doesn't look nice. Often, I mean, even though we're very close to Newcastle here, we're still like a smaller town. So the actual choice of our organic veggies is pretty poor as well. Yeah, so
being able to grow your own, and then doing the design course, sort of touching on what you were saying, was either feast or famine. You'd have a glut, or there's nothing there at all. So you've now been able to learn how to have food growing successionally and be able to stack functions to be able to get the best out of it. Because obviously you're a busy woman. I mean, you're a mum, you're a wife, you're a paramedic, you're running mushroom workshops. Sleeping, is that optional? Is that?
It is a little bit, yes. There's not a whole lot of sleep in this house, but and I suppose, I'm really lucky. My other boys, and even Breath, loves coming out into the garden. And as part of my design in my garden, we've done wider paths and all that sort of thing to accommodate Breath. And I've even found in workshops, it's great when older people come, because they've got the space. They're not, in tiny little paths in between little veggies. That just doesn't work for us. So, as I said, by learning all of that, in the PDC, it was really nice, to grow something as opposed to the traditional way that we used to grow in, beds and all that sort of thing. And, we've had a couple of different ways that we've done it. I started out with Mandela gardens and then just found that was just too overwhelming for my lifestyle, as you say, super busy. And I'd come out and, weeds are a part of what it is, but I would come out and it would just be far too overwhelming for me. And I would go, I can't do this. So I had lots of food and lots of stuff in there, but just, really sort of quite hard to manage in my life. So now we've gone to smaller raised beds. So I probably have the same amount of space to grow in, but they're just more manageable. I can, knock over a weeding or a replenishing of a bed in an hour or so. And I can go, I feel like I've done something. That's fine. And, in my snippets of time, I can grab an hour here and an hour there and feel like I've done something, as opposed to with the big Mandelas that I had, it would be several hours, and often I would be up and back because, the kids would need something or,
that's such a good point to make, because for people who are starting out, you can get really discouraged, I think, when you try something and it doesn't work, or you see something beautiful somewhere and you want to implement it. It's so contextual to your property and your needs and how you live your life. And we we spent a bit of time talking to Will and Anthea from Maplewood, because they do the garden design. He was talking about that and getting to know what his clients do and their routines, because that informs your garden and your practice and how you set it up so much. And people just sometimes miss that step, that connection between.
And I think you're right. It's so important to really live in it, I suppose. Like I often, just talking to people and they want to get their gardens, they've built a new house or whatever, and they want to get their gardens up and running straight away, and which I get, I'm super excited, and I do the same sort of thing. But it's a good thing to sort of pull it back a little bit and live in that space for a little while and actually like observe, and see what's going on in the garden and what works for you. You might be able to put your herbs a little bit further away because that's the way you go to your clothesline or something, so you see it every day. So whereas it might not work for other people, they might need it at their back door because most of their lives are sort of inside. So it just I think it's very specific to the area and your lifestyle.
We've just bought a property, so I'm frantically like doing my plan up and my site sector and redoing it all. And I noticed the other day I was sitting down with a cup of tea looking at the garden plan thinking, that's really good, but there's actually not a space for me to sit down with a cup of tea and enjoy it. And the kids' play stuff's up there. So if I'm down here, like, is there going to be enough shade if they want to come and join me and do things with me in the garden? So I'm kind of at that next stage. Like, this is all the bones of what we want, but then how are we going to live in that space and how am I actually going to practically use it, and trying to, even though we're not there yet, try and think about how we do live and what our routines might look like. So it's really interesting going through all those layers in the design for sure.
Yeah, and it's something that should change over the years as well. And I think some people, like, they get their plan and they think that they can't change it. Like, I think it's an evolving thing all the time. And, our lifestyles change as we get older, as our kids get older. They're not using the garden in the same way as, teenagers don't use it in the same way as toddlers do. So I think it's a really good idea to have an open mind that your garden will change over time because your use of it changes.
As you learn and as you discover and as you're out there, I mean, like, I've got my design behind me here. Now, we did Brett's PDC in winter. Now, my design's changed from that. There's some things that I'm like, this is really going to work, but there's other stuff that I've now sat with and I've been out there more often. I'm looking at it going, this is not going to flow. This is not going to achieve everything that I would like it to achieve. It'd still be okay. It'd still work. But is this the best possible way? So instead of being so invested in, well, this is what I've done and I have to hang on to that, it's a case of, we get out there and go, hey, you know what? If we just make these changes, or, there's quite a few exclusion tunnels that we'd included. But now I'm looking at that going, do we actually need that many exclusion tunnels? And if we do we need them all now? Can we do one and then the rest can wait? And let's see, just make those small changes and then really, have a look at what's happening with that, accept that feedback and then make adjustments, as opposed to let's just go hell for leather and put it all in. And I totally get what you're saying about the mandala gardens, because we had them as well. We'd made the chicken domes and we're going to do the chicken tractor systems. And I put all this effort into designing and making these huge round beds. And then I realized it takes 3 of us to move the dome because I'd made it too big. It's trying to stay on top of all of them. It was working full time. It was impossible. So I can, totally appreciate that. And a lot of people listening would see a lot of this stuff, if they go on, have a look at permaculture properties on Instagram.
Absolutely.
And they go, wow, we can have all of this stuff. And it's like, if you've got a team of people to help you, or you've got the time to invest, like, it's got to be to, as you said, your own context and your time and your energy levels. And I think that's a big thing too. You've got to be honest with how much energy. I mean, I've had some days where I'm like, I have got so many jobs to do, I can't be asked. I want to have a cup of tea. Read a book.
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose with my life as well, with Brace, with his disability, things change so quickly. Like we can be all fine and dandy, and I'll be out in the garden, and then all of a sudden we're in an ambulance, on the way to hospital because he's taken unwell, and and then I won't see my garden for 5 days. So it sort of needs to be a little bit self-sufficient as well. So, my garden at times is not pretty. We've had a bit of a time just recently. So we've had a stay in hospital. We actually had a holiday before that. So at the moment, it's looking a little scrappy, but that's okay. There's still lots of food in there. I'm actually using a lot of the weeds. I have a friend who loves, knows all about weeds and what you can use them for and all that sort of thing. So I'm embracing the weeds.
That's something in Brett's garden that I was kind of coming to terms with, should you say, when you walk around, you're like, that urge to just pull that weed out because you see it. But then he was like, well, no, all the aphids actually prefer the sow thistle, so they go to that instead of the brassicas, and then I can just pinch the top off and give it to my chickens. And I was like, that makes so much sense. But
absolutely,
I guess until you know.
It's a process. It's taking me quite some time to embrace the weeds. And I have a neighbor who often comes over and he's like, oh, your garden's always so messy and blah. And I'm like, you know what? You just need to deal. They are actually, serving a purpose. Like, at the very least, they're keeping the soil from being bare.
Exactly.
So, that in itself is worth gold.
And often weeds are there because you're lacking in a nutrient. And when that weed eventually dies down, or its taproots or whatever the structure of that weed is doing something. It's actually really beneficial for the soil in that area. It's what that soil needs.
Yeah.
So,
and often a lot of the weeds you can use medicinally and in balms and all that sort of thing. So I'm learning much more about that as well. And and of course I've always got chicken and duck feed. When I need to get rid of them or I'm replanting or something, all of a sudden I've got all of that to use. I've got it to use in my compost if I need to. So at the moment we're in the process. My husband's given a bit more of his yard, and I'm actually in the winter, hopefully I'll do some bare rooted trees. I'm trying to do some nuts and some more stone fruit. And I'm going to espalier them. So where I've got the soil, it's really quite lifeless. So at the moment, we've dug some holes and we're, improving the soil. So all our green waste and our neighbours' green waste is going in there. The weeds that I pick, I've had comfrey. So we've done a couple of harvests of comfrey and so much in there. We've dug out the duck pen for all the manure and all that sort of thing. So I'm hoping by the time the winter comes, that soil will be full of life and the trees will go in and, we'll have a great growth on the trees.
That's such a good idea. I'm going to steal that for our yard because we've got literally a block of land and it's all clay soil. And at the moment there's kangaroos everywhere. So we're going to have to put a fence up and figure out the kangaroo situation. But I just said to my husband, how are we going to get good quality soil quick enough to plant everything? And that's a great idea, to just dig the holes and start in situ composting.
Yeah. So because we will obviously go a little bit because we're mostly sand and clay here. It's a mix of sand and clay. So the clay is not so bad, but the sand, the water just doesn't stay at all. So we will build up a little bit just to hopefully, keep that water in that soil. But hopefully by improving the soil as well, that will help the water retention and that as well. So, and it's easy, that's all your waste, like, food scraps and all that sort of thing. Ask your neighbours. Yep. Often we've just been delivered green bins in the Port Stephens area. We haven't used our green bin, and the neighbour hasn't used their green bin because we take it all and use it into our composts and all that sort of thing. So
I just had this image of you, Kellie, like sneaking down the street at night, like collecting everyone's green waste out of their bins.
Well, it's so good. We're in a really lovely street, and the neighbours are all fantastic, and often I'm giving them my spare produce and all that sort of thing. So they know what we do here, and they're more than willing to it saves me. So they'll put their green bins out, at any time, and I'll like, yeah, you're right. I'm down the road and grabbing their bins. So yeah, it's
that is
nice.
brilliant. That's brilliant. And see,
Yeah.
it's that simple, isn't it? Like, it doesn't need to be a
Yeah.
complicated process. It's as simple as,
No.
anyone listening, just, if you need some more green waste, talk to your neighbours.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Even like local cafes and that are often willing to give away their scraps. Even their coffee grounds, to use. And if you're using them in a big area, like coffee grounds can be a little controversial. Some people like them, some people don't. But if you're using it in a big area like we are at the moment, I don't think, you're going to have too much drama when you're using a whole heap of other stuff.
No,
We
it's
have
all
banner
about
grass as
balance.
well, so we often will cut the banner grass down, especially this time of year because it grows again so quickly, and use that as well. So yeah,
I love that you touched on the cafes too. I mean, there's cafes, there's also like small grocers as well, like your independent
Yeah.
grocers, because often the
Yeah.
bigger guys have Oz
Systems.
Harvest and the bigger organizations
right.
that come and collect, which is absolutely fantastic. But if you're just a little backyard grower, like I know our IGA down here, I just either give them a call or pop down when I'm down there and say,
Yeah.
you got any scraps? Sometimes I get 2 or 3 boxes and I divvy it up between the chickens and the compost. And other times it's like, no, sorry, someone else has come in, or no, we just don't have any scraps. Okay.
Yeah, that's
roll with
right.
that. But, I mean,
Yeah, well,
some of the things that we get are amazing.
Yeah, well, we're really lucky too. I'm in a little group. Madawi is fabulous. We have a really fabulous permaculture community. We often do crop swaps, and I think we do fortnightly crop swaps around the area.
That's good.
Yeah, it's fabulous, and there's quite a few of us in the local area that often exchange things and that. So but also as part of that, we actually do like a veggie rescue from one of the local supermarkets. And you're right, they do give most of their stuff to Oz Harvest, but Oz Harvest don't take like the lettuce leaves that come off the outside, or the cabbage leaves and all that sort of thing,
all the scrap.
The scrap stuff. But it's fabulous for either your compost or feeding your livestock, your chickens and ducks and turkey. Like I've got turkeys and ducks here at the moment, and they love it. Like the turkeys especially, they're fabulous for getting, for using all that sort of stuff up. So, and they give the manure out the other side. So, that's fabulous too.
How much land are you on there, Kellie?
We're on 1.25 acres. So we're actually on a little bit more than Brett, which is, but just obviously it's a little bit different than his. But yeah, we're on about the same size land. But we're nowhere near as advanced as he is.
I don't think most of us are anywhere near.
No, I don't. No, that's right.
And it's a lot of work what he does. I don't think I could
absolutely.
maintain it even if I had it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like he works super hard to have that, and so
it all comes back to that context, doesn't it? Love to, I suppose, dive into the mushroom side of things because I'm excited to talk about mushrooms. I love mushrooms, and I've always thought, I don't know why, whether I just got in my head about it. I've always thought, mushrooms are something that, you need to almost have a PhD to be able to grow them because you've got to be, super knowledgeable and have this amazing skill, and it takes all this time and energy and effort. And I've come to start to understand that that's actually not the case. And I think that a lot of people may have had the same thinking as I've had. So I'd love to, I suppose, start with, you sort of shared a little bit about how you got into mushrooms, but how you got really passionate about mushrooms, and then how, you sort of, the journey has progressed. And I'd love to sort of end with, how simple it is to actually grow, because that's the thing I really want to share.
Yeah. So, like as I was saying, I did the beginner course with Aaron Boyer initially on his first lap around Australia with his little truck, and like just loved it, and super easy. I was the same. I was like, I love mushrooms. I'd got the kits from Bunnings and had absolutely no success whatsoever. I was like, oh, okay, like this is not as easy as I thought. And then by doing Aaron's course, I was like, oh, hang on, this could be a doable thing. And yeah, I loved it. And, just was doing it on paper pellets or kitty litter, as how we were taught initially. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. And then when he come around the second time, I did his advanced course, and where he was growing on logs and so forth like that, and thought, oh, this is super amazing, and just honed my skills and read books and that sort of thing, but was still certainly not ready to do workshops or anything like that on my own. I was still learning a lot and growing different types, and the mushroom community and all that sort of thing has come on a lot too. You could only get a few different strains of oyster mushrooms, several years ago when I started. Whereas now, the mushroom spawn that you can get is like quite substantial now, all sorts of different ones. And I also wanted to grow in the garden, see if it was possible to grow in the garden. And because they have such great benefits, like the mycelium that mushrooms grow on and all that sort of thing, just the great things for your soil. We all know mycelium is fabulous at the best of times, but even introducing, oyster mushrooms or red wine caps or whatever into the garden just increases that so much. So initially, as I said, I did the second course, and then Aaron moved actually to London right at the start of the pandemic. And of course, he couldn't actually work over there, because everything like us had shut down and so forth. So he decided that he would actually do an online component, but he also wanted to do a practical component as well. So he put those together, and he needed some facilitators in Australia to do that. So when he put out the thing, I was like, oh, I put my hand up and was like, I'd really like that. That'd be super cool. Because I wasn't ready to go out on my own, I didn't think I had enough knowledge at that time. But I thought, well, that's great. So he can be the teacher as such, but I can be there and learning while I'm going and helping people learn as well. So I did that and facilitated his workshops for about 2 and a bit years. And then he got married and moved over to Bali, and he went a different way. So he's over there doing courses and so forth over there, and getting right into the technical side, flow hoods and sterilization and all that sort of thing. So, and he decided that he would not do the workshops anymore. So that's when I was like, oh, that seems like there's a little bit of a market for that. So again, did some more research and played with it around, grew heaps of mushrooms at home, working out what were the best ones and, that would give the best crop and all that sort of thing. And then decided that I would start some workshops, and it's been fabulous. We've had some great workshops that have gone on, and people have just loved it. We've had fabulous feedback, and a lot of the feedback is, we thought it was going to be too hard. We didn't realize that it was quite as easy or as accessible as as you've made it. So what we've done is just taken out all the technical stuff. So the flow hoods and the big sterilization that, the commercial growers need, and really pared it back. So yes, we will get contamination eventually, but we've got a few things to minimize that. And so what we can grow, things that we can grow on, like kitty litter, so paper pellets, which are super easily accessible. You can grab them from your local pet shop or the supermarket. We can grow things like reishi, so and turkey tail, so your medicinal ones. Yeah. Reishi, turkey tail, lion's mane, and all that sort of thing. And then all your edibles as well. So all your different types of oyster mushrooms. So there's pink oysters and king oysters, phoenix oysters. So there's a whole lot that you can just grow if you had nothing else but paper pellets. So
cool. That was one of my things. I always got scared about it being not safe, like dangerous. Like I'd poison
Yeah.
myself somehow, or
Yeah.
that was my
So-
biggest fear.
Yeah, and like, so to put it into perspective, yeah, we do have to be careful, especially with field mushrooms and foraging. And that's certainly not my area of expertise. And if you were going to do that and pick them from, out in the fields and so forth, you really need someone who is super experienced and knows what they're doing. But in saying that, there is about 3 million, I think it's about 3 million species of mushroom, like of mycelium that grow mushrooms, if you like. And so of that, there's about 25 species that will make you crook, and there's only about a handful that will kill you. So, like, your chances of actually, picking a mushroom and being super unwell is quite small. But again, the consequences are quite bad. So definitely, make sure that you are experienced in that. The great thing about growing these mushrooms at home is you'll always know what you're getting is safe, because you're buying from, you know, registered spawn and all that sort of thing. So you're getting it from a commercial supplier that grows this stuff all the time. We've got some great commercial growers in Australia that are really safe, that have been doing it for many years. It's really easily accessible. You can get it quite easily. It's not that expensive either for what you get. And you can also
sort of come down a little bit too with the spawn. Maybe that's because the market's starting to grow and it's becoming a little bit more well known.
I think that's right too. Yeah. So obviously the more demand for something, often the price will come down because they can do it in bigger batches and all that sort of thing. So yeah, we're finding that the spawn and the variety too is growing every time, you get on, and I'm super excited. It's almost like plants. I get on, there's another one. I'm gonna try.
I need this in my life.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I haven't tried that one before. Let's have a go at that one. So yeah, sometimes you got to pare it back a little bit, but
I think we can all relate to that.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, but super easily accessible. When I teach my workshops, we not only do we do like paper pellets, which is really easy, and I find paper pellets are great for people like in small houses or units or anything like that, much less mess. It's also a great way for kids to grow. So we often use lime water as a pasteurization technique. But obviously you're using lime and it can be a little bit abrasive and corrosive, and so it's not great for little kids. But when you're using the paper pellets, because they're like almost pre-sterilized, they've been heat treated to make them into pellets, and we use a little bit of dishwashing liquid in the water to hydrate them as an alternative to the lime. So super safe for kids to get in there and have a go. And I find the kids really love it, getting their hands in and mixing it up and that sort of thing. And then to see, a few weeks later that they're getting mushrooms, it's super exciting for them. So
a speedy process too. It's not like, they plant a tree and they have to, okay, kids, we'll come back in 5 years and this tree will be, 6 foot tall.
Absolutely.
It's weeks. Like they can almost, when they start fruiting, you can almost sit there and watch it, can't you? Like from hour to hour. Like
you absolutely can. Yeah, you absolutely can. So when they actually start fruiting, they can actually double in size every day.
Whoa.
So so you've got to be really careful. They're like zucchinis. When you go out to the zucchini and you go, oh, I might get that one tomorrow, and you go out and it's like twice the size. And that's right. So, that's right. So they're a bit like that. So you have to sort of, it's that fine line. Well, maybe we'll pick them a little bit earlier because they just grow so quickly. And so your white oysters, in ideal circumstances and the right temperature and all that sort of thing, you can actually have the mushrooms or the fruit in 9 days.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
quick.
Yeah.
So fast.
It's pretty amazing. But, this time of year, a couple of weeks, and we've shown that We did a workshop, not last, it'd be 3 weekends ago now, and they've all, like most of the class have already got big flushes of out of their buckets, so of pink
Very
and
cool.
white oysters. So they're all very excited, which is great.
So cool. My little boy
Yeah.
loves mushrooms. He's 3. Like, what 3-year-old likes mushrooms?
Yeah.
But he loves them. So
Yeah.
we're super keen to grow some, especially if we could do it with them. He'd love that.
My kids did love them, not so much at the moment. I'm hoping they'll go back to it. You know, they're a bit teenagers at the moment, so you know they just grunt at you. So.
It's like having toddlers.
Yeah.
So and then we learn on how to do it on straw as well, and sugarcane mulch.
Yeah.
So that one actually gives you your highest yields, and it's a little bit less intensive in that you don't have to feed your straw with the mushrooms, because it actually has enough nutrients in that. But as you can imagine, you know, if you're in a unit, you probably don't want sugarcane mulch or straw all over the place. It can be a little bit messy.
Yeah.
But it's something that most people, especially gardeners, have at home.
Yeah.
I'm also experimenting with using banner grass.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so yeah, we're going to have a go. Like, as I said, we've got quite a lot of banner grass here. So, you know, like, let's give it a go. If it works, it's great. If it doesn't, you know, no harm, no foul.
The thing, isn't it? You just give it a go.
Exactly right. So, you know, and especially white oysters and your oysters, they're a bit like the weeds of the mushroom thing, and they grow so easily on a lot of stuff. We can grow them on cardboard really quite easily.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so yeah.
Like shredded cardboard, or?
Yeah, you can actually just rip it into pieces, dampen it down, put the spawn into it, and it'll often grow on those. So you can actually do that. So if at the time you don't have, say, king oyster spawn, but you want to grow some king oysters and you've gone to the shops and purchased them, you can actually use the butts of the king oyster to actually grow some spawn, so that you can, you know, inoculate, say, a bucket later down the track. So really,
cool.
you actually don't, you know, there are ways that where you don't actually even have to buy spawn. So if you don't have the money to actually buy spawn, there are ways that you can actually grow mushrooms with almost no cost.
Wow. So basically a bucket with some holes, some wet shredded cardboard, and a couple of mushrooms from the shop, and you can give it a crack.
Yep, that's about it. Yeah.
That's brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah, it's much easier than people think. And because you're not growing commercially, you know, it's not a big deal if a bucket contaminates. You know, if it contaminates, great. Well, okay, if you've even the paper pellets, I pop in the compost. The straw, if it's contaminated, I'll often just use it as a you know, a mulch in your garden. No dramas at all. And oftentimes you'll probably even get a flush of mushrooms when you've popped it in the garden anyway. So it's super cool. There's really no waste, which is great. You can use all the waste that you use, and we use, like, unfortunately, the mushroom things. It's a really heavy plastic user, like a lot of gardening sort of things. They are really heavy in plastic. You can't buy spawn unless unless you do it yourself, which takes a whole lot of things. It's all in plastic. So that's why, even though we're using plastic buckets, we're using the, you know, good quality food grade ones, and we're reusing them time and time again. I've got buckets that are like 5 and 7 years old, because you're not having them in the sun, so they don't break down. So you can keep using those buckets. You can use recyclable buckets, you know, like honey, you know, your honey buckets, your yogurt buckets, you know, your kilo buckets of yogurt that you can buy at the supermarket. Often people will buy them. You can use those. I've used Tupperware containers, you know, that I've been throwing out and all that sort of. So old washing baskets.
Oh, fantastic.
So, yeah. Yeah, so there's lots of things, to try and minimize that. And the great thing about it, if you're growing your own mushrooms, as you know, when you go to the supermarket, all your mushrooms are, on styrofoam, the nice ones too, are on styrofoam plates with plastic all over them.
Yeah.
So by by having your own mushrooms and growing your own mushrooms, you are reducing it, quite substantially as well, which is good.
So for a family of 4, like we are, what kind of size container would you recommend to kind of start with to see how you go?
Yeah, so I use 10-litre buckets here, just because they're not so heavy. They're easily stackable. You can stack 3 or 4 on top of each other in a fairly small space, and have more than enough. Like, if you had maybe 4 buckets, even if you had 8, but had rotate them round, that would be more than enough for a family of 4. That do eat quite a lot of mushrooms. So yeah. So I often have enough, that I'll dry, and all that sort of thing. And then if you start doing, so in the buckets, you can grow pretty much all year round. But when you're starting in the garden, you will get seasonal flushes. So, like your shiitakes on your logs. So they're a real long game. They will take up to sort of 2 years to actually get a flush of mushrooms, but then that log will probably grow, flush for 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah, and the great thing about logs is they're pretty much set and forget. So you inoculate your logs. It takes a couple of hours to inoculate some logs, and then you set them in your garden. In a nice shady spot in the garden, and let them do their own thing. The worst thing that you might have to do is give them a water every now and then to keep them a bit moist, and set and forget. So they're great for busy people because you really don't have to do much.
Yeah, that investment of time and energy to be able to reap the rewards.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I suppose, you can compare your bucket mushrooms and your log mushrooms to growing annuals and perennials. Perennials, it's going to take you a little bit longer to get that harvest, but you're going to get that year in, year out with a much less effort than what you do with your annuals. So, yeah.
The annuals.
I wanted to ask you, when you were talking about contamination, I suppose if someone's listening and they really just have no idea about mushrooms at all and they're thinking, oh my goodness, the word contamination, can you, I suppose, explain a little bit more about what that means? Because that might sort of put people off and think, oh no, well, I couldn't possibly eat them if they're contaminated.
Yeah, so it's not the actual mushrooms that are contaminated, it's actually your substrate. So because we are not using big labs or great big sterilizing machines and autoclaves that often take up the size of a room, in the commercial grow sense, they're massive and they put all their things in there, and what they actually do is sterilize them so that they're completely devoid of life. So all their substrates are completely devoid of life, and then they introduce in really sterile circumstances, they actually inoculate the spawn. Then they might use like a millet mix or whatever to make spawn. So they've sterilized it, got rid of everything on that, and then they've inoculated it with the spawn and let it grow, and then that's what we would use. So it's super sterile, and they don't have any problems with contamination. Now, because we're not doing everything super sterile, yes, we're doing things to minimize it, like using a lime water pasteurization technique, which we learn on the workshop, which is again is very easy with super easy stuff to get, but it is a step that we need to do. So yes, we are minimizing the chances of contamination, but we're not devoiding the your substrate of all life. So and our I suppose our end game is to make sure that our spawn is stronger than whatever else is left on your substrate. Okay. So and often it is, because one, you're using it at a higher concentrate, and two, they're really strong like it's a really strong mycelium that grows super quickly in a lot of these oyster mushrooms. We still try and be as clean as we possibly can and all that sort of thing. But eventually, because, in the environment, there are blights and molds and all that sort of thing that are just in our environment that we can't really stop. Eventually, you will get the most common one is like trichoderma. So it's that bluey green mold that you often see on bread that's gone off. It's a really common mold on foods and coffee grounds that have sat there for a little while. It's quite common. So you will often get that. But in saying that, you will often get, 4-5 flushes of mushrooms before that's an issue.
It's obvious when that happens.
It usually is, and it's usually not the mushrooms that are affected. It's actually only your substrate. So even if your substrate has a little bit of that mold on it, the great thing about mushrooms, not only for molds and all that sort of thing, but they don't uptake chemicals. So mushrooms are one of those great things that, not like, say, celery and that sort of thing that suck up all the poisons that if they've been sprayed and that sort of thing. Not that we should be spraying mushrooms, but they certainly don't uptake that sort of thing as well. There was actually a study done in America somewhere where there was an oil field, a diesel that had been contaminated with diesel. And so they decided that they were going to inoculate it with an oyster mushroom. So when they first took the readings of the contamination, it was at something like 2,000 parts per million.
Yeah.
And 20,000 parts per million. And then when 10 weeks after the mycelium had come in and the oyster mushrooms had grown in it, it was down to 20 parts per million.
Whoa, that's a massive improvement.
Massive, absolutely massive. So, and apparently the mushrooms were still edible. So, not sure whether I would have eaten them.
I was going to say,
probably not recommended, but yeah. So, and there's lots of this sort of thing happening in the mushroom space about using them for decontaminating fields and so forth. So, that's exciting in itself. The only thing that they do tend to take up, like, almost everything, is heavy metals. So, as long as you don't have any heavy metals, you should be, perfectly fine, which is, really great, and, improves the soil and all the life in the soil as well. So,
what are some of the favorite names of mushrooms that you've come across? Because I've, when I've jumped in and I've had a look at different mushrooms, like, there's one on I think it's on your website, on your Instagram page or something, like it's Monster Blue, and like there's some really cool names.
There really are, and you'll find too, different places will call the same kind of mushroom different sort of things. But like there's Monster Blue, there's King Oyster, there's Phoenix, Kings. There's lots of different ones. Like we've got the pinks and yellows, which are just spectacular. Like they almost look like a bunch of flowers when they come out. They're just so pretty, and really beautiful eating as well. The pinks especially are really good fried up, nice and crispy. And your yellows, like they're a much finer texture, and they're great in salads and that sort of thing. So
they keep their colour when you cook them, or they change?
They do dull quite a bit, but you can sort of still tell that they are, they are the pink and the yellow. Yeah. I was just saying there about the yellow, how they're great in salads. Just so everyone realizes, mushrooms actually have a coating, if you like, that is called chitin, and that's all mushrooms. And humans can't break them down. So if you're eating mushrooms raw, they're fine, but you don't get any nutritional value out of them. So mushrooms actually do need to be heated to break that chitin down to get the nutritional benefits. Yeah, so a lot of people don't know that.
No, I had no idea.
Yeah, because I mean, I've used raw mushrooms in salads all the time, but it just passes through as roughage if it's not heated.
Wow.
Yeah. So
fun
yeah, so it's
fact,
interesting. Yeah, that's it.
Permaculture trivia question.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. We're also growing like in the garden as well. So on either wood chips or in straw or sugarcane mulch, and in straight into garden beds as well, which is super easy. And once you've inoculated an area, you're pretty much guaranteed mushrooms for life. So yeah, so in that way, it's a really cost-effective way of adding, lots of food to your garden.
Very cool.
Absolutely. And the benefits to the garden, the benefits to the soil. I mean, even growing them in the buckets, even like after, like you're saying before, you've taken your flush, or you've taken your 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 flushes, depending on what you're growing and the conditions.
Yeah.
And then being able to put that into your compost and add that beautiful diversity and that mix to your compost that then gets passed on to your vegetables, or even if you throw that straight onto your vegetables as mulch, like the benefits that continue, like it's just ongoing. It's not like it's just about the mushrooms.
Yeah, it's super cool. It's great,
a very closed loop system, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, and I'm hoping if the banner grass, takes off and I can and do that, like, yeah, it's a completely closed system. I'm not having to buy in, substrate. So, which is super cool.
We'll definitely be watching closely.
You'll have to share next year when you do plan some more workshops what they are, so people can check it out and book in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll be starting. I'm going to do some dates very shortly, and we'll be starting back in February just to let everyone get over the Christmas break and all that sort of thing.
We're not sure when this episode is live, so for anyone listening, this is we're talking about January, February 2024. So don't think that oh my goodness, I've got to wait till 25.
No,
yeah, that's right.
But we can share little snippets on Instagram before we go live in Jan. So if people want to, you do Christmas, like for Christmas presents, vouchers and things.
Yeah, that's something I'm doing in the next couple of days, is actually putting some vouchers up. So that, if anyone wants to do that for Christmas, that would be fabulous.
Lovely.
I think I might buy me a gift for Christmas this year.
That sounds like a plan.
Hey, Jo, I'll buy you one and you buy me one.
Yeah,
that sounds
the
perfect. You can do that.
Yes, me and my girlfriend often do that sort of thing too.
We can just go together, it works out.
Yeah, that's right. Have a weekend away.
So we normally ask one final grounding question to everybody that comes on, and that's, what was one piece of permaculture advice that you'd want to share for someone just starting out?
I think just start, just start, and be open to change. Like, if you have a design, it's not set in stone. You can change it, all the time. Often things will change, your lifestyle will change, so I think your plan has to change with it. So I think that's probably, just be open to change, and don't think that it's once you've done that plan, and like I get, those plans take a while to do and you fiddle around with them for ages, but it's okay to change it and to change things, when your lifestyle changes or your circumstances change, like, as we can see at the moment, like the rental crisis and the housing crisis is getting, so what people might have, and then they may have to sell their house, they can still do it. You just have to, change the way you do it. So, but get started and be open to change, I suppose.
That's awesome advice for sure.
It's great advice. Thank you. Wonderful.
Thank you so much for taking time to talk to us, Kellie. It was so good. I learned lots of stuff, and I can't wait to book in next year and get stuck into it.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been awesome.
Oh, thank you.
Can't wait to see you.
Yes, it's been great to meet in person. And we don't live that far away from each other either. So I'm only over near Branxton.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Oh,
so,
lovely.
We might actually run into each other at a produce share at some stage.
Yeah, that sounds good.
That's great. Fantastic
All
one.
right. Well, have a good day, Kelly.
Thank you, you too.
Bye.
See
Bye.
ya.
And that's the end of the episode. So thanks for listening to the Practical Permaculture podcast. We hope this episode gave you some inspiration, confidence, and has helped you in your Permy journey.
Don't forget to head to the show notes for all of the resources mentioned in today's episode. And if you like this podcast, please remember to subscribe, rate, and share. It definitely helps to push us out further. And if you didn't, well, that's okay. I'm sure you'll find something that you love. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.